Ellie Muniandy took up post as Equalities, Diversities and Inclusion Officer at the National Library of Scotland around a year ago, moving into libraries from the third sector. In that time, Ellie has developed an EDI action plan linked to the National Library of Scotland strategy. Ellie has also developed and delivered a programme of monthly learning sessions covering different elements of equalities, including neurodiversity, gender identity, and social class. I'll hand over to you, Ellie, and thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeanette. Hi, everyone. My name is Ellie Muniandy, and as Jeanette very kindly introduced me, I'm the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the National Library of Scotland. This is a new post, so it's the first time that the library has had a post dedicated to this topic. And I thought it was useful just to give you a bit of background to how my post came about. And then I'll go on to speak a bit about my understanding of what my approach, I guess, to equality, diversity and inclusion, and end with talking a bit about some of the work that I've been doing at the National Library so far. So back in 2020, we saw a massive kind of societal reaction as a result of the Black Lives Matter protests around the world. So there was a massive kind of call to action and a call for accountability around racism. And this suddenly also became a kind of wider topic around equalities in general. I think, this kind of stuff had been going on, there were rumblings of it before, but there was something about 2020 and that summer that really kind of pushed this into the spotlight. So the library at the time put together a short life working group to consider what this could and what it should look like for an organization, and what kind of changes were required around this. So this group developed an outline of action. However, there was also a recognition that in order for these changes and actions to take place and to be embedded, that there needed to be a post whose role it was to kind of monitor and support these. There was also an understanding at the library that there wasn't anyone in the library at that present moment with the necessary expertise in the area to provide such support. So as a result of that, there was they agreed to fund an EDI officer post for a 2-year fixed term contract. So I came into post February last year. So I have, I'm celebrating my 1-year anniversary a couple of days ago at the library. So this job is pretty big. So I cover both the kind of external and the internal. So the external involves the kind of content that the library puts out. So it's events, it's exhibitions, it's partnerships, and it's resources. But also the internal is more focused on organizational culture change, on kind of policies and procedures, also kind of recruitment, retention practices, as well as kind of adhering to our legal obligations as a public sector body. So with equality, diversity and inclusion for me and for the library, it's not an add-on. It's, when I talk about the kind of organizational culture change, it's a whole new approach and a whole new way of working. And it requires quite a psychological shift. So I'm a therapist in my other jobs, and so I'm always thinking about this stuff both at a kind of organizational level, but also at a kind of internal psychological level. So it's about unlearning the ways that we have been socialized. We live in a world where we have kind of systems of oppression that have been operating for many, many years. And it's really important that we become aware of them and start to kind of unlearn the ways that we have been socialized into having the kind of ideology that can exist around these systems of oppression. So these systems operate in and across the whole of our society. And I think what's so interesting about this is that I've not met anyone coming into this job and like speaking to people about this topic. I haven't met anyone doing this work who are against equality, diversity, inclusion. No one said, this is bad, this is wrong, we don't want this in the library. Everyone is really up for it. but there's a really vast understanding of what achieving that can mean and what that can look like, and to what extent, because there are lots of different ways to conceive of equality, diversity, inclusion. So want to kind of interrogate these terms a wee bit with you today. So for me, equality can be simply seen as kind of giving everyone an equal chance, or giving everyone the same thing. And I think the challenge with that is that we don't live in a world where everyone is treated equally. And not everyone is born and is given the same opportunities and the same access to resources and the same support through their lives. That changes, all the time. So it's because we don't live in a world where everyone is equal in their experience. And there are loads of, there's so many stats and kind of studies that have shown the kind of specific ways that marginalized groups are affected, and all the kind of different areas. There's almost every area of life that marginalized people experience some kind of disadvantage as a result of their kind of marginalized experience. So therefore, in order to be fair, in order to give people equality of opportunity, we need to understand the ways and how marginalized people have been discriminated against. Because so there's a really famous equality slide that I use in my trainings as well, of just kind of people standing on boxes. And it's the idea that, some people have loads and loads of boxes that they're standing on, and other people don't even have any boxes. And so in order to, we need to understand the boxes that we all have and how that looks different for different people, in order for us to understand what support, what resource is needed for people who don't have any boxes to have a few more boxes. So I think that is really, that's a really, really important thing to kind of understand first, and what the barriers are to people that have been created by these systems. And it gives us a chance to then develop new ways of working in order to kind of remove or dismantle them, or to give some people more boxes who need them. So I guess for me, I think one of the things that is always really tricky about this topic is that there are some people with loads and loads and loads of boxes, and other people with no boxes. So the discrepancy is huge, and there's a huge variety amongst that as well. So in order for us to really consider equality of opportunity, we're talking about quite major changes that are necessary. We're not just talking about a bit of support here, a bit of support there. We're talking about really, really different levels of support that is needed. So that's kind of, equality. And again, that kind of that support that's needed, how we make that change, is going to look different across the different bits of the organization, but it needs to be across the whole organization. And that can be, I think one of the kind of struggles with that is really important to acknowledge is around everything to do with EDI, is that whatever we're trying to do within our isolated areas, we have a whole system that we're working alongside. So, the education system, the healthcare system, all of these systems with their own, difficulties and challenges, so we can do so much within our kind of area, but there are so many different influences as well. So I think that's a really important challenge to acknowledge in reference to equality of opportunity. Thinking about diversity, so the diversity of an organization is often viewed in relation, I find, when I've given trainings and things to all sorts of different organizations, that's often framed in relation to the kind of demographics of the country or area that they're situated in. So the ambition of organizations is to be kind of representative, and that is seen as being a success. So if the workforce that we have represents and reflects the community that it's serving, then we're doing really, really well. And I guess that for me is, I have an issue with that, partly because if we look at Scotland, the demographics of Scotland, there are tiny proportions of the population that are, people of color or BME, for example. So it doesn't track. It's like, okay, well, if there are 10% of the country are people of color and we have 10% of our workforce, then we're good, we're done. We've got diversity, we can tick that box. Whereas for me, the aim of diversity, should be about having a broad range of people from all backgrounds. And that in of itself is a good thing. That we're kind of modeling a society that we want to have rather than replicating the society that currently exists. So in my opinion, there can never be too much diversity, and therefore it's always something that we should be striving for. And it isn't necessarily something we will ever kind of achieve, that we can ever kind of tick off the list. It's, there's always ways that we can bring a more diversity of voices and experiences into our organizations. So I think for me, that should be a wonderful aim that we're striving for, that we will never achieve, and that's okay. I guess, and then we kind of come on to kind of inclusion. And inclusion for me is really probably the most interesting and kind of expansive concept in the kind of trilogy. So this one is about the kind of experience, for me anyway, it's like the experience of marginalized people within an organization. So do people feel included? Do people feel listened to and appreciated for their difference? So not them necessarily as an independent individual, but as all the different aspects, all the different identities that they hold within themselves. Is that appreciated and acknowledged and listened to and reflected within the organization they work in? So often organizations create and kind of perpetuate a particular working culture, and everyone who's new is kind of expected to slot in. And often I think there's, it's not unknown, but I think it's really interesting how unconscious that can be. That it's really, we're talking about really, really subtle ways that people aren't conscious of. So for example, people eating at their desk as opposed to going and eating in a communal space, that is a really, people can be, oh, well, people are busy, people don't, but actually having, it's like, is there an issue with the communal space? Encouraging and supportive, is it not a pleasant and welcoming place to be? Is that why people are eating at their desks? By eating at your desk, you're not socializing, you're not engaging with other colleagues. So there are all these kind of small things around workplace culture which can have really big impacts on marginalized people and their sense of feeling a sense of feeling belonging with an organization. And so it's like that working culture can make people feel uncomfortable, to share or talk to their colleagues about their interests or lives. So for example, if everyone's talking about their husband and their wife, saying that, oh, I have a partner, who, where you're not married, or everyone's talking about their kids, and there's, an expectation that kids are the thing that everyone is doing, and you don't have kids, it can make it really uncomfortable or difficult to kind of feel included. So how do we show that? How can we add, the difference that people bring into an organization? How can that add value and meaning to the staff, but also to the work that you're doing as well? So these are just, I'm just touching on some of these, I guess, as a way of like introducing, this conference and thinking about EDI. What do we mean by EDI? What are we talking about? How does that impact and come into our organizations in different ways? And obviously I'm, in terms of this talk, kind of thinking about it quite specifically in reference to workforce, in reference to that kind of internal work culture. And I know the rest of the conference will be kind of looking at that in reference to other areas as well, which is going to be really exciting. So yeah, in terms of what I'm doing at the library, I'm working with staff to address some of these issues. And I think what's really important to acknowledge is that this stuff is long term. We're not gonna, there are some quick wins we can have, which absolutely is great, but fundamentally we're looking at that kind of organizational culture change, which takes a long time. So the approach that we're taking at the library is to acknowledge that there are different levels of work that is needed. So there's stuff that is needed in terms of our collections and how we talk about our collections, what we show in our collections, but also, you know, in terms of our kind of recruitment, you know, if we're looking at it internal, in terms of our recruitment practices. So we're looking at it across the board, both at a kind of very structural institutional level, also at that kind of interpersonal level, and, you know, within the kind of internal. So how do we feel inside us? You know, how do our staff feel? How do people feel coming into our organizations and engaging with our services? So in terms of what I'm doing at the library, the first thing that I'm kind of ongoing process of introducing training. So we've got EDI mandatory training for all staff, and where possible that's in person. And that for me is really key. So it's kind of introducing the topic, and it's because it hasn't been done at the library before. So no one at the library has had EDI training specific to the organization. And I think what the importance of that is that you can give a message. It's an organizational communication of just like, this is how in this organization we talk and we think about EDI. This is why it's important, and this is what we're hoping to do, and how can we all be a part of that? You know, EDI is something that everyone is involved with, and this is us demonstrating that by making sure everyone is involved, everyone is having a conversation about this. So it was really important that that was across the whole organization. So rather than kind of doing it in teams, having a lot of cross colleague contact. So people just sign up to the trainings, and it means that there's a really wide variety of folk who are coming, you know, across the organization. So having that opportunity to come together as colleagues, listen to each other and talk about these topics has been really useful. And also for me, it was really important that I was present and delivering these trainings, because so often organizations, what they do is they kind of get external companies to come in and deliver that. And one of the challenges is that you don't get anything bespoke, you don't get anything specific to that organization. But also in terms of building up relationships, you know, now by the time I've finished delivering the training, everyone in the library will know who I am, everyone will have spent some time with me, and everyone will hopefully feel that I'm at least kind of approachable, and they'll be able to come and talk to me about anything to do with EDI. So there's that, and also for me, that I'm learning as a result of spending time with everyone, the different and specific challenges that exist within the particular organization. So what are the specific challenges for the library in reference to this topic, and being able to hear people's thoughts and views on that. And that helps then, you know, in terms of the EDI action plan that was talked about, you know, that is what is, you know, I can use that information as a way of working out what more is needed in terms of support within the organization. The other thing that I have been doing as a kind of separate to that is I'm calling them everything you always wanted to know about EDI but were too afraid to ask. So these are kind of deep dive sessions. So they're an hour and they're once a month at the moment. And they're an opportunity for folk around the library to let me know, oh, I heard this term, or I've heard this concept, or, you know, I don't know very much about this particular topic, and I'd like to know a bit more, you know, because the EDI mandatory training is a kind of general overview. You know, we're talking about the concepts, we're talking about what this means, but the everything you always wanted to know sessions is an opportunity for us to get into some of the nitty-gritty, some of the details of it. So people are able to come and kind of make suggestions to me, and I will then run, you know, just an hour session, and it's an opportunity for people to come and talk about it, but also I record those sessions and I put them up for the whole organization to see. So I record the part, my inputs, as it were. So I'm coming and being like, okay, we're talking about class today. What do we mean by class? These are some of the kind of overview issues that are that come up in reference to class. So that I find, again, a really useful way of giving people an opportunity to say, I want to learn more about this topic, and this is, and for me to be able to respond directly to those requests. So yeah, so that's continuing. I also, so we had an LGBT staff network established within the organization that had just been set up, I think, as I came into post, but we're looking at how we can grow that. So staff networks, staff equality networks are a really great way of creating a space, a support space for people from marginalized communities to come together and support each other within an organization. So obviously it will depend how big the organization is, you know, in terms of whether, you know, staff networks make sense, but being able to have a space where they can talk specifically about the experience of being marginalized within this kind of workspace. So there is, you know, it has kind of two elements. First of all, it's kind of a support for people, but also for me, it allows me to have a relationship with a particular group and kind of test things out and to take things forward. So if people are saying, you know, if there's a people of color group and they're saying, you know, we're experiencing a consistent issue, like everyone's experienced this same issue, that's really, really useful information for me to then be able to take action on it. So it's a responsive experience of like, there is time and space for them to come together and support each other. And there is also an avenue for them to let us know about issues that are present, and for me to be able to take action around those. So yeah, hopefully the staff networks is something that we'll be developing in the future in a lot more detail. I'm just working on the kind of terms of reference and all the kind of, yeah, paperwork and stuff around that at the moment. The other, yeah, big thing that I've been looking at is the equality impact assessments. So because we are public sector, we have a legal duty to do equality impact assessments. So that's looking at anything around policies or projects, and basically having an opportunity to consider the impact or consequences for the protected characteristics from the Equalities Act. So if we are bringing in a particular policy, or we're wanting to start a new project, thinking about, okay, what needs to be in place in order to ensure that the different protected characteristics are given the support they need. So if we're looking at an exhibition, actually, you know, what do we need to consider for disabled people? We need to make sure that there's kind of physical accessibility. We need to make sure there's, you know, we have different things that you know, the hearing loop is in operation, you know, all of these things. So it's a really useful tool. And that's how I frame it, is that I'm like, this is a tool, you know, because people come to me and they say, yeah, EDI, that's great. How can I be sure that what I'm doing is addressing EDI issues? And the equality impact assessments are a really good tool that people can use to be like, okay, I want to check in, I want to see if actually this works for people. I'm actually going to take, instead of immediately go to consultation, I'm actually going to take some reflective time to use this tool that will kind of ask me questions and help me think through the process. And consider all the, like, some different options that I need to have at least reflected on and thought about before I then go and ask, you know, real people who are coming in. Because I think one of the things that happens with EDI quite often is that there's kind of fatigue, consultation fatigue. So people are being asked about everything. What about this? What about that? What about this? And actually, there's a lot of information and you know, learning that can be done internally and ongoingly without having to continuously consult. So yeah, so that has been a really, and that's, you know, it's tricky. It's tricky to think, to try and imagine, you know. So it's also about how do we consolidate that learning. So, you know, if someone has done a really good EQIA for a particular event, can that be a really good model for anyone else doing events that they can look at and go, oh yeah, we do need to make sure there's, you know, translator, BSL translator. We do need to make sure there's subtitles. You know, all these things are available. So that definitely is yeah, again, it's a, part of that kind of culture change, and it's a tool that can be used to make that shift. The last thing I'm going to talk about before I finish, I've been doing it for a while, is that I have recently been given a National Lottery Heritage Innovation Fund grant. So this is a really exciting research project. And I'll be looking at recruitment and retention in reference to EDI. So how do we create a welcoming and inclusive space for marginalized people who are coming to work in our organizations? So this is, you know, there's the kind of recruitment or the inclusive recruitment stuff side of it, but actually also for me, really interestingly, is when someone has arrived, how do they feel welcomed? How do they feel included and accepted? And one of the kind of, especially given that we as an organization have quite low numbers in some areas of diversity. So people of color is definitely one of them. So if we are, you know, if more people of color come and start working for the organization, what do we have in place to ensure that they are getting the support that they need, given that inevitably the working culture is not necessarily going to be set up to kind of work for them, because it hasn't had to be in the past. So acknowledging that we as organizations are going through transition, are going through change, but at the same time, we need to protect and support the people who are marginalized, who are coming in to help us do that. So I'm looking at what does areas around like harm and accountability, what do they mean for big organizations, and what support can we give to people, you know, around things like microaggressions, you know, like how do we acknowledge that harm has been done, but also, because I guess for me, one of the key things around all of this work is, you know, EDI stuff can bring up really strong emotions and opinions across the board. And what can happen is, you know, is a lot of division. And we see that in terms of the media. We see how this is depicted in the media. Topics around this are depicted as being combative, as being divisive. And I guess for me, there is something about how do we bring empathy and compassion, regardless of what our beliefs are. How do we bring empathy and compassion into this? How do we acknowledge harm that's being done, and how do we hold accountability? And it's an accountability that isn't a form of punishment, that we aren't just going around being like, you can't say that, you're not allowed to do that, how dare you say that, you're getting cancelled, because that doesn't work. You know, we need to bring everyone along with us. And so there's something about how do we have accountability of like, someone has been harmed as a result of actions or behaviors that you have done. However, there is an opportunity for growth and for learning. There is an opportunity for awareness. And how do we do that at that kind of interpersonal staff level? So that's the kind of purpose of my research project. So I've got the next 6 months to kind of really deep dive into that. And hopefully by the end of that, I'll have some solutions or not, who knows. I have a problem, we'll see if we can get to some solutions. But I'll be kind of looking both within this sector, both the library sector and the kind of cultural heritage sector, but also out with the sector and looking at kind of grassroots organizations and kind of activist community spaces around how do they address harm, how do they address accountability, and how do we create a welcoming space for people? Okay, so I think that's, yeah, I'm going to leave it there for now. Yeah, feel free to let me know, post in the Q&A if you have any questions for me. But otherwise I will hand back. I'm not sure who I'm handing back to, so I will, hopefully someone will jump in a moment.
Yeah, I'm here, and despite my huge technology fail doing the presentation and letting you all read the notes, my great apologies for that. That was a great talk, Ellie. Thank you. There's a few questions in the chat, in the Q&A that I'll just go over. It looks like the chat's disabled, so if the questions can go through Q&A, that's fine. Deborah would like to know the difference or importance of equity over equality. She's heard that equity is more important and leads into equality.
Sure. Yeah. So this can happen. So equity is a more kind of North American term. So you'll get, so yeah. And I think, in kind of America and Canada, they tend to use the word equity. In the UK, we tend to talk about equality of opportunity. So that kind of means the same thing. So it's not giving everyone exactly the same. It's giving people what they need in order to have an equal opportunity, an equal experience of, getting a job or whatever. So yeah, that's the distinction. So yeah, absolutely, we would talk about and focus on equality of opportunity.
That's great. Thank you. I have another question for you. With the Everything You Wanted to Know sessions, how do you ensure that your segment and address is unbiased and covers the full scope of EDI? Are others ever invited to address questions?
Yeah, so the way I tend to do these is that I'm providing information, and that there is also then opportunities for discussion. So people can come and kind of be in the live session with me. And so I'll kind of give a bit of background, give a bit of information, and then there'll be exercises and opportunities for people to have discussion and conversation about a particular topic. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't think it's possible to be unbiased. So I guess it's about how do we acknowledge that and reflect on that and allow those kinds of conversations to help us change our views, and I'm absolutely not someone who's coming in and being like, I know everything about everything. It's very much like, this is my experience, this is what I bring to this. And, hearing other people's experience inevitably will change my views and change how I talk about things and how I present things. So it's about how do we allow that that change and that shift.
That's great. I don't think we've got any other questions. Lots of praise for your presentation. So thank you for that. And we'll go on to the next person. Thank you, Ellie. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Jeanette, sorry, there's just a further question has just come in there late, so we do have a couple of minutes. I wondered if we could take that